It is now my pleasure to call upon Trustee Howard to escort Ms. Burwell, and I ask Dean Murray Gibson to join me at the podium.
Mr. President, it is my honor to present Sylvia Mathews Burwell for the degree Doctor of Philanthropy.
Thank you, Trustee Howard.
Sylvia Mathews Burwell, catalyst for hope, advisor to presidents, and creative agent of change. As a leader of one of the world's most imaginative and aggressive efforts to eradicate global poverty, you give hope to millions of people whose lives would otherwise be cast in despair. Your intellect, energy, and creativity as president of the Gates Global Development Program, and with other organizations dedicated to aiding the developing world, inspires our faith that humanity can solve even its most daunting problems. With your political acumen and your knowledge of economic policy and global finance, you have been a source of wise counsel for national and world leaders, including 2 United States presidents.
In recognition of your success in applying broad-gauge, coordinated solutions required to attack the root causes of global poverty, Northeastern is pleased to bestow upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Philanthropy. In recognition of this degree, Trustee Howard will vest you with the hood. Now I'm going to present you with this diploma. Sylvia Mathews Burwell is a person of tremendous intellect, a dedicated public servant, and a voice for the impoverished around the world. She is a Rhodes Scholar who worked in the governor's office here in Massachusetts and in the Clinton White House. She now serves as president of the Global Development Program at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the world's most imaginative and aggressive efforts to eradicate poverty in the developing world. She truly represents what it means to be a scholar and a leader. Please join me in welcoming your commencement speaker, Sylvia Mathews Burwell. Sylvia.
Thank you very much, President Ione, for that very kind introduction. I will admit that when I got your letter inviting me to be the commencement speaker today, my surprise and response reminded me of a book I recently read. I actually read it 37 times last month. You see, these days, my reading is a little different than those that I stand before. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. If anyone has any questions about Winnie the Pooh, I'm your gal. And I can also recommend Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. But my response to this humbling invitation to speak with you today comes from a different book. It comes from Lily's Purple Plastic Purse. And when Mr. Slinger, Lily's teacher, sees something remarkable, he says, "Wow." That's just about all he can say. Wow. Wow, what an honor it is for me to be here to celebrate with each of you today. And wow, how proud you should all feel of all that you have accomplished. As I prepared for this speech and did some research, I read one of Bono's commencements, J.K. Rowling's, Ken Chenault's, and the speeches of a number of others. Common themes included: 1, state the obvious. You will not remember anything from this speech, and you probably won't even remember that I was your graduation speaker. 2, speak about something you know about that is personal unless you're planning on announcing the Marshall Plan. I'm not qualified for that. And 3, do not give advice about doing meaningful things in your life. I'm afraid there was a clear split on this point. By this review of the literature, I've taken care of number 1 and will now seek to make some progress on points 2 and 3. I remember shortly after I finished school, I had just started my first full-time job as a consultant at McKinsey & Company in New York City. It was challenging, rewarding work, but a few months after I started, I was unexpectedly offered another job. The job was to run a hotel construction company in the Caribbean. That's right, the Caribbean. Here I was, 25 years old, and the opportunity to run an entire company. There would be a generous salary, not to mention the benefits of life in the tropics, a suntan all year, pina coladas by the pool. It was going to be spring break, 12 months a year. My bags were packed. But before I booked my tickets, I did something I had rarely done at that point in my life. I called someone I considered a mentor. And if any of you have mentors in your iPhones, your Blackberries, or your smartphones, today let me say this. Put them on speed dial. Put them on your list of favorites. You'll never regret it. Other people say you can never be too rich or too thin. I say you can never have too many mentors. And one of mine I called that day. He listened to what I had to say and then said, "Let me give you a piece of advice. If you think about your career and 3 things I'm about to tell you, I think you'll make the right choice." He said, if you can look back on a year of your life and say, I've learned, I've made a difference, and I've had fun, and then you do that for 60 years consecutively, you can look back and feel you had a happy and successful life. This conversation made a very powerful impression on me, and that's why I share it with you. It was a career advice conversation, but it was just as much a life advice conversation. It's a conversation that led me into public service and philanthropy. It's a conversation that helped shape the things that I value. And it's a conversation that has guided me almost every day of my career. Always keep learning, always have fun, and always make a difference. And for those of you with your smartphones out there, that's 70 characters. It's tweetable. For most of us, the first 2, learning and fun, come pretty naturally. So in our brief time, I want to focus on making a difference for others. As you can guess, I never took that job in the Caribbean. And ever since then, the idea of learning, having fun, and making a difference has guided my career. With both my work in the Clinton White House and now at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I was attracted by opportunities to do all 3. There are, of course, many ways to make a difference. In my life, it's been through government and philanthropy. But it started out in a much different scale in my hometown of Hinton, West Virginia, where I learned the importance of giving back to my community. If someone died in the neighborhood, it was the kids' job to go house to house in the neighborhood and collect money for flowers. When it was Halloween, my sister and I couldn't go trick-or-treating until we went trick-or-treating for UNICEF. It was an upbringing that taught me early on that life isn't being lived to the fullest unless it's being lived in the service of others. Still, it's easy to lose sight of that very simple idea. Soon after I arrived in Washington, D.C. to work in the White House, I remember being so wrapped up in my job, I sometimes forgot who the work was ultimately for. As Chief of Staff at the Treasury Department, we were dealing with the Mexican debt crisis, the threat of government shutdowns, and dozens of other smaller crises. At the White House, meetings started at 7:15 a.m., and I rarely went home before 9 p.m. Weekends were often no different than weekdays. That's why I decided I wanted to volunteer and engage with at-risk youth. I had done it in New York City and found it rewarding and fulfilling. I thought tutoring would be a good way for me to feel impact more closely. But there was not a lot of flexible time in the White House, so I needed to tell my boss, U.S. Treasury Secretary Robert Rudin, because it meant that I would not be available for 1 hour during the day. And in the White House and the Treasury Department, that's an eternity. It can mean making or missing a news cycle or keeping the president waiting for a response to one of his questions. When I told Secretary Rubin, he said, "I'll support you in what you do, but I want you to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it so that you get the most out of it." The number of people you could help if you spent your hour focusing on Head Start or some other after-school program for at-risk youth would be much greater than helping a single individual. When I reflected on Rubin's comments, he was right. I was doing this for myself. I tutored one child, Francois Archange, a young Haitian American. I hope I helped Frenchie, as he called himself. I know Frenchie helped me learn from him, and he helped give meaning to the rest of the work that I was doing. Connecting real people to your work is important, and sometimes it happens in unexpected places. I remember going sea kayaking in the Chesapeake Bay, and the guide I was with asked me what I did for a living. Most of the time when I was trying to have 1 or 2 hours of downtime, I would try to avoid talking about my work like the plague. Most people had a strong opinion about what I did, and they weren't afraid to share it. After a series of evasive answers like, "I work in Washington," it came out and I explained that I worked in the Clinton administration and what I did. Her response between splashing of the paddle was, "Oh, do you know about the Earned Income Tax Credit?" She said that it had made such a difference in her life as a single mom. This is a tax credit for the working poor. And during the first 2 years of the Clinton administration, we expanded the tax credit for more working parents so that if you worked 40 hours a week, you didn't have to raise your children in poverty. This tax credit, the guide said, had given her the opportunity to make a down payment on a car, and she was planning on buying a washer and a dryer. Today, as you graduate, I challenge all of you to find a way to give back. It may be in your career, or it may be in your community or your place of worship. It may be helping a neighbor next door. It may be finding ways to help someone all the way on the other side of the world. The first step is to decide what is important to you. Define your values and then act on them. Many of you on this campus have already been meeting this challenge both in Boston and around the world as members of Northeastern's impressive network of volunteers who are making a difference in healthcare, education, water quality and accessibility, and economic development. Congratulations to your Engineers Without Borders chapter for its efforts to provide clean water to villages in Central America and Africa. And through Northeastern's Social Enterprise Institute, students have been making valuable contributions to microfinance projects in South Africa and the Dominican Republic. And also a thank you to a public servant who is an important part of this institution and a leader I am proud to have worked for, Michael Dukakis. When I finished working for President Clinton, I thought I would go to work in business again. But I got an offer from another Bill Gates. And I couldn't refuse because Bill and Melinda's giving is also deeply rooted in the values that I believe in. In my 10 years at the foundation, it has grown from just a handful of employees to a global organization of over 1,000, including experts in vaccines, leaders in education, and some of the world's most talented agricultural scientists. While the foundation was made possible by the generosity of the Gates family, the foundation is really driven by the power of its ideas and values. Bill and Melinda started the foundation because they believe every person should have the chance to lead a healthy and productive life. More than a decade ago, Bill and Melinda read a newspaper article about millions of children dying each year in poor countries from diseases that most people in the United States don't even need to worry about. One disease in particular, rotavirus, caught their attention, and it was killing 500,000 children a year. They'd never even heard of rotavirus, and they actually thought it must be a typo in the newspaper. When kids in the United States get diarrhea, their doctors give them electrolytes. When kids in the developing world get it, they often die for a lack of treatment that's as simple as Gatorade. Our world today is filled with inequities like these, inequities that burden people from the moment they are born. The random geography of birth should not determine whether a child has a chance to lead a healthy life or get a basic education. Some of you may be thinking, if I were a billionaire, it'd be a lot easier to give back. If your checking account is anything like mine was when I graduated, you probably have little, if anything, financially. In fact, you've probably been on the receiving end of assistance from families and others. But today, as you graduate, you enter the world with another kind of wealth. It's your skills, your ideas, and your voice. So I'd like to propose a simple idea, one that you may remember. On May 6th, it should be more than the anniversary of your graduation. It should be the date you ask yourself some questions. Are you learning? Are you having fun? And are you making a difference? As you go through life, there are many effective ways to approach and quantify your contribution, but impact on individual people is a powerful lens to keep in mind. In my office in Seattle, I have a picture of a little Senegalese girl named Ndé. She's 18 months old, and she's sitting in a little blue bucket with her head just peeking over the top. I send a copy of this picture to every employee who joins the Global Development Program. And I write a note saying, "This is your boss." And I mean it. Every action I take, every action my team takes should be for her benefit. She's the one we really work for. So try to find your own boss, not the person who signed your paycheck, but the individual who can remind you what's truly important in life. It's as easy as looking at a photograph. Thank you.